Hello y'all! Welcome to another video dedicated to help you break out of the cycle of toxic behaviors and relationships. My name is Coach Jeanette from @Jeanette.xzero on TikTok and Instagram, and if you like anything personal development or personal growth, make sure you hit subscribe to join the tribe. Now in this video, we are going to be talking about communication and exactly why the communication that you're trying to have with your partner is not effective. Now, how many of y'all have tried everything to communicate with your partner, talk about the things that are important, but you find yourself having the same arguments over and over again? And I know it can be completely frustrating when you feel like you're going in circles and there's nothing getting resolved. I've seen this happen way too often where my clients come to me and they say, Jeanette, what's going on? I'm communicating with my partner, but we're having the same issues come up. And I hear you. That's how my communication used to look like in my past relationships too. But there's actually common reasons that I figured out that helped me and my clients really up their communication game when it comes to actually finding compromise and solutions for the issues that you're having. So I'm going to share with you the common reasons on why your communication might be defective, and then towards the end of the video I'll share some tips and tricks that you can use so you can really start having healthy communication. Now, the first common reason that I noticed why communication is defective in a relationship is because either you or your partner is unwilling to communicate in the first place. Now, it might seem obvious, but I've seen a lot of relationships where one person is putting in the work, trying to communicate, while the other person mentally checked out and they've already shut down. They don't want to talk about anything. They just want to keep the peace. And so you see one person fighting for the relationship, trying to communicate, and they're going in circles while this other person doesn't care. And so the first thing you want to make sure you and your partner are both on the same page is the fact that you both are willing to communicate and you're open to each other's perspective, because it is going to be impossible to resolve the issues that are happening in your relationship if only one person is going to do the work. Also, keep in mind, if your partner is not as communicative as you like, maybe there might be some underlying reasons too. Sometimes we naturally shut down when we're feeling upset, that's our coping mechanism, or sometimes we get really anxious and we want to fix things right away. Whatever it is, we all have our behaviors and habits that might get in the way of effective communication, but that doesn't mean that we can't work from it as well. So if you guys are not starting at the same playing field where you both are excellent communicators, where you're able to effectively be present in the conversation, then remember to give some grace and some patience so that you can work up to it together. Now, if you're still watching the video, I'm assuming that you and your partner are still on the same page and you want to effectively communicate. And if that's the case, here are some concrete things that you can notice in your relationship today and change to effectively communicate. Now, the second thing that I see that gets in the way of communication the most is that either you or your partner makes it a competition. Now, what does that look like? It looks like you versus me. I'm right, you're wrong. I want to win and someone has to lose. And it's not really you guys working together as a team to solve the issue. Rather, it's the ego and the pride getting in the way, and it's really stopping you from being able to be vulnerable with each other. Because if we're so caught up in those details of who's right, who's wrong, you did this, you never do that, yada yada yada, you are going to find yourself not being able to solve any issues, because that is not your goal in the first place. Because when you're trying to communicate while having a competition, subconsciously you're telling your partner whatever our issue is, it's not that important. Rather, me being right and me feeling right is more important. And I get it. Sometimes we get caught up in our ego. You know, our defenses come up and we want to feel good. But in a healthy relationship, sometimes we need to let our egos aside. And so ultimately, yes, you guys can fight about who's wrong, who's right, and take responsibility for your faults. But if you let that get in the way of remembering the most important goal, which is it's supposed to be you and your partner working together versus the problem so you can move forward, then you're going to find yourself stuck and not actually finding any solution at all. And this goes into my next point of keeping score. If you find yourself, whenever you're having an argument, pulling out the file cabinet and digging about things from the past, telling them that they did this, this, and that on top of what you're already trying to solve, it is going to overwhelm the conversation, and you might find yourself feeling even more upset because you are trying to solve multiple things at once. Now, of course, if you feel the need to pull up the file cabinet and finally talk about things all at once, there most likely is an underlying issue where you find yourself bottling up your emotions a lot without taking the time to be incrementally vulnerable here and there. And if you're the type of person who wants to keep the peace and just deal with it later, I'm telling you right now, all of that keeping the peace is not going to be helpful if you truly cannot let go of that. If you're holding on to it to use it against your partner later, it's only gonna cause resentment and an unhealthy relationship. So if you wanna let go of that pain and suffering that you're carrying, I definitely recommend incrementally learning to communicate and be vulnerable instead of bottling up just to keep the peace. And if you're having trouble and you're not sure how that works, you can go ahead and click the link in the description below, and you can book a call with me and we can consult how your communication is and where there might be some points that you might want some help with. These are all things that I help my clients with as well, which is communication scripts, making sure that they can set their boundaries, communicate vulnerably, and maximize their chances of being seen, heard, and understood in the relationship. And moving to number 3, the third thing that makes their communication defective is defensiveness. Now, we all have a bit of defensiveness here and there. It's natural. We want to protect our ego. It's coming from a place of protection. I get it. However, if you find either you or your partner is defensive every single time you are communicating about something, that is going to lead to the same arguments over and over again. Because when someone becomes defensive, not only are you telling your partner, I don't want to hear your point of view at all, but you're subconsciously belittling or invalidating your partner's point of view. Instead of letting your partner know and offering this space of, I hear your perspective, you know, this is something I disagree on, or this is something I can work on, you're immediately shutting them down and letting them know, it's not my fault, it's all you, and I don't want to acknowledge anything that you're feeling or the reasons why you're saying this. And this goes back to my second point, which is it's not a competition when we're trying to communicate with our partner. And when defensiveness comes up, it's really hard to have that same mindset of us against the problem, and it really reinforces the you versus me. And also, if you're constantly defensive whenever you're having an argument, it might indicate that you have a hard time taking responsibility for your own actions, because we are all human and no one's perfect. Sometimes we do have our faults, and it's okay to admit that. It's healthy to admit that as well. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person and there's something wrong with you. It just means that sometimes our behaviors are not okay, or sometimes our behaviors hurt our partner, whether it was intentional or unintentional. I lost track of what number we're up to, but the next thing that really destroys communication is when you're constantly critiquing your partner's character. Now, there's two things about this. If you're constantly critiquing your partner's character and all your arguments are about wanting your partner to change their personality instead of the behavior that your partner is doing, then there actually might be a compatibility issue. And the second point is that when we are critiquing our partner's character instead of their behavior or our perception of their behavior, we are telling our partner that, hey, you are bad for this, and essentially saying that they are inherently a bad person. And if we're constantly sending that message to our partner that they're a bad person, they're selfish, they're rude, or whatever characteristic that you label them to be, they're going to start feeling pretty bad about themselves. And we want to ask ourselves too, if this person is so bad, why are we still with them? And if they're not that bad and we are just communicating in a way where we're labeling them as so, we want to make sure that we are careful with our words, and instead of critiquing their character, recognize that sometimes it's their behavior that can be shifted a little bit. It doesn't make them a bad person. And when we stop labeling them as such, it can be so helpful because it helps you focus on the right thing. Communication is also about compassion, and being able to be considerate and have some awareness on how our words affect our partner is so important. Because once we inflict those wounds of you're so selfish, you're so critical, they might be thinking, I'm being attacked right now, I just want to defend myself and argue that their point is wrong. And so to maximize the chances of actually finding a solution and communicating healthily, let's focus on their behavior instead. Now the next point I want to talk about is very important, because I know one of the biggest things that us ladies does is kind of just assume that our partner should know how we're feeling based off of our nonverbal communication, or the thought that they should just be able to read our minds. While yes, nonverbal communication is so important, and we're going to talk about it in our next point, one thing that I want to recognize is that the biggest thing that actually stops us from having a healthy communication with our partner is the fact that we're not actually communicating. What I mean by this is either one, you find yourself being passive aggressive, making snide remarks, trying to hint at your partner that you're upset but not actually wanting to say it up front. Maybe you're shutting down, being silent, and giving your partner the silent treatment, which is very unhealthy because we're punishing our partner for something that they might not even know that they did wrong. Or you can even be displaying spiteful behavior or testing your partner, trying to get them to say specific things so that you feel satisfied. Now, if you're communicating in all of these ways that I listed just now, I want to encourage you to remember that communication does not work if we are not specific or bold about it. People are not mind readers, and you can't expect them to know exactly how you're feeling or what you want if we don't communicate that to them. Like the quote says, closed mouths don't get fed. It is okay to express how you're feeling. It doesn't make you uncool or needy or whatever people say. Healthy communication, it's going to allow you to have that relationship that you want. And not only this, but like I mentioned before, nonverbal communication is so important as well. A lot of the times when we're communicating, it's not about what we say, rather it's about how we say it as well. I know it's hard, we get passionate, we get heated in the moment, and our subconscious takes over. However, if we can even bring some type of awareness while we're communicating and be cognizant of this, it can be so helpful to prevent ineffective communication in the long run. Now, those are just the common and main things that I notice from my clients that prevents them from having healthy communication style. Of course, there might be a couple of other things that you might be doing, and if you want to find out specifically for you what is preventing you from having unhealthy communication, you can click the link in my description to book a call and we can have that in-depth consultation. Now that you've heard all of these ineffective things that we might be doing that is causing bad communication, you might be asking, well, what do I do now? So I'm going to give you a couple of small tips that you can take with you from this video now to try to utilize it and have a healthier communication with your partner. The first tip that I have for you today is making sure that you are not using attacking language. Now, what this looks like is saying things like, you never do this, or you always say this. So you find yourself using language where it's extreme and also pointing the finger of you and me. And since arguments are not supposed to be a competition, you want to use more team building language instead. So this looks like we, or I perceive this as, and that way you're reminding your partner that you're both on the same page, or if there is something that you want them to change, you are sharing your perception and how you feel about it rather than who they are as a person and trying to label them down and put them in a box. Now, the second thing that I want you to take away from this today as well is actually 2 mindset shifts that are going to be so helpful when you're trying to resolve an argument. First mindset shift is remembering that your partner's perspective and your perspective can be completely different and you don't have that same reality. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that either you or they are wrong, but it just means that you have different perspectives. Of course, if these perspectives are things about your values and the deeper rooted morals, then that's another question about compatibility. But if it's just about differences in opinions, what I want you to remind yourself is that I will not assume that my partner knows what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling if I don't communicate it. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm the type of coach that is not about playing mind games, but actually creating authentic, healthy relationships. So if that aligns with you, make sure you hit subscribe to embody the same mindset. Now, the third thing that is so important to remember, but oftentimes we forget when we're having a heated conversation, is to be vulnerable. Now, it's easier said than done, of course, But what being vulnerable is allowing yourself to be bold and really take responsibility for how you feel and own up to your emotions. What this could look like is saying things like, I feel XYZ, so just sharing a specific emotion that you feel, or saying things like, I noticed when you did XYZ, it made me feel confused. And of course, vulnerability is hard if growing up that's not something you're used to. However, the more that we allow ourselves to own up to our emotions and just say it how it is, we allow ourselves to, one, eliminate any possibility for miscommunication, and two, get our needs met faster. Instead of being passive aggressive or using silent treatment to communicate, it's important to really allow ourselves to step into that vulnerability and be more attuned to our emotions. With that said, I hope that this video was helpful for you today and that you were able to grab something out of it and use it towards your relationship so you can create effective communication. Remember to take it step by step and follow for more if you want to learn more healthy communication and relationship tips. Comment down below which point resonated with you, and I'll see you in our next video. As always, you got this.